It's time to look into, is your house in a flood zone? Nobody knows if their house is in a flood zone unless they're living on the lake in the lake, necessarily. But today, I like to cover topics that are trending, that are hot, and things that you may not know about. So I have with me today two fabulous people from an incredible company called myfloodstatus.com. They do national flood search, and their company believes in confirming, challenging, and knowing what your true, and I mean true, TRUE, flood status is. Because guess what? The FEMA maps are not always accurate. Guess what? You might be paying for flood insurance on your house, and you don't have to. So I'd like to welcome to the Voice of Real Estate today two phenomenal people, Robert Palumbo, who is a partner and VP of Sales, and Patty Casaza, who is the VP of Business Development for this wonderful company, myfloodstatus.com. And it's powered by a wonderful company called Western Technologies Group, WTG. What the good, right? What does that stand for? WTG. Welcome. You're doing good for people. You're saving them money. When we can save money, that is always a good thing. Robert, why don't you tell our listening audience all about your company and how it came about?
Sure. Thank you, Deb, for having us here. MyFloodStatus.com is the premier provider of flood zone determination. So we developed a proprietary technology that's revolutionized the way these searches get done by providing accurate visual verification, being able to show somebody in real space on a tax map where the property sits with aerial photography and layering in the flood zone and showing with pinpoint accuracy where the flood zone sits in relation to the property boundaries, but more importantly, where it sits in relation to the structure, which is where we see a tremendous amount of errors.
And that's really important because I don't think people realize that the FEMA maps were redone recently. We broadcast from Princeton, New Jersey, into New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and we've had some amazing hurricanes in the last 15 years in this state. And ever since then, people have become more aware of their properties, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been doing this for over 20 years, and it took the two superstorms, Sandy and Irene, to really wake people up. It's the same issues, but it put it on the front page of the newspapers. People's insurance, flood insurance, started going through the roof, started impacting the real estate transaction. So it really gave us a foothold in the marketplace where people really wanted to know, is my property in a flood zone or is it not? And they want to be properly determined.
And what determines a flood zone exactly?
So FEMA has their flood maps, and if they issue them out, and if the map intersects your property, but more importantly, if it touches your structure, you're considered in a flood zone. So from a banking perspective, when a bank does a mortgage for you and you're in a flood zone, you have no other option but to purchase flood insurance. The bank is going to require it. It is a law, it's a regulation in the banking industry. If you own your home and you don't have a mortgage, you're not required to have flood insurance. So that's interesting. So if you buy a property for cash, it's not required, but it's certainly recommended. Absolutely. We recommend that everybody get flood insurance. We're not in the insurance business, so we have no skin in the game. We don't do insurance, and we don't accept loans. Again, we try to confirm, challenge, and know somebody's true flood status.
That's right. So if you really are going to need flood insurance, it's good to know what it is. And do you have any idea what flood insurance runs on a property at all?
It can range from a preferred rate of $150 to $200 as high as $40,000.
Wow. So, depending on the property and what you have there. Correct. Exactly, because you're insuring that replacement value of all that sort of thing. And houses that are located on, let's say, the famous Lake Carnegie that we have here in Mercer County, they all don't necessarily need flood insurance.
No, not necessarily. And it's always interesting to look at that because you could be, first of all, you could have two houses next to one another. One's in a flood zone and one may not be. And just because you're near a lake doesn't mean you're in a flood zone, because the thing that comes into play at that point is elevation. You may not be in a FEMA flood zone, number one. And number two, if you are, then there's always that game of elevation. Are you sitting up high enough to literally not be in the flood zone?
And the question is, why are the FEMA maps not accurate? Why are there all these misleading websites out there? Why do the banks and the insurance companies have incorrect information?
Well, FEMA is a governmental agency, and they issue flood maps, and they put them out on their website. But what they don't do is they don't take the time to geocode it down to the property boundaries like we discussed and tell you whether or not it's impacting the structure. The big box companies out there that do flood zone determinations that compete with us, they're more concerned with speed over quality and accuracy. Okay, they just want to get it back to somebody quickly. They use GPS type data, which we all have GPS in our car, and it's really good, but sometimes you're a house away, a block away, a mile away from the destination that you're trying to get to. Well, that's the same situation that we see with the big box companies. They run into that same situation, and people are misidentified, where we use our own proprietary geocoding. So when we land on a property in our system, we know we're on the right property. We know when we layer that flood zone in, we know that that's where that flood zone sits and where it sits in relation to, again, the property boundaries and the structure.
And the beautiful thing about your report, it's $30. That's it. Why wouldn't everybody get a $30 flood zone report so they really know the true situation on their home? Because it's not like buying a piece of furniture or a piece of clothing. When you buy real estate, it's probably the largest investment you make of your lifetime. Why wouldn't you get a $30 report?
Well, I think it's awareness. You know, when we're out talking to people, we do webinars all the time. We work with realtors all the time, every day. But the consumers are not aware. Realtors are not aware because, you know, we often talk about, it's sort of like you don't know what you don't know. So how would you know that if you didn't know that? Okay.
Now you know, because everybody knows, because you're on the Voice of Real Estate today, right?
Now everybody knows.
Spread the
There's
word.
no more excuses. But that is the truth, is that you're depending upon a report from a bank or an insurance company, you're making an assumption that that's right. So you wouldn't even know that there's someplace else you can go. So that's where we're out there, you know, being advocates for this, and working with realtors who also then become advocates, because at the end of the day, the consumer has to have the right information.
Absolutely. You want to be able to give them as much information as possible so they can make a good decision. And, you know, people think that homes that are near water, because there are beautiful properties in Princeton on canals, on creeks, on streams. Are they necessarily in a flood zone?
Not necessarily. So, you know, a lot of realtors market properties in high-risk areas with our flood report to show that a property is not in a flood zone. So not every property may be in. Again, it's where that map sits in that town will determine where the property, if the property is or is not in a flood zone. Just to go back to your point, you know, you talked about it's a big investment. It's probably the biggest investment somebody's going to make. I bought a used Lexus a few years ago, okay, $25,000 car. I paid $60 for a Carfax report to tell me, was the car in an automobile accident? Was it in a fire? Was it in a flood? You're buying a home for $30 to get that comfort level to know, am I properly determined? Because quite frankly, an insurance company is not going to tell you, all right? They're just going to try to put a premium, a policy in place, and the bank doesn't know either. They're just relying on these big box companies to decide whether or not a property is in or out of a flood zone. The real difference is there's a form that we have in the flood zone determination. It's a standard sterile cover sheet to a flood determination. Very few people know how to read it. Where we change the game is, again, we provide visual verification. So we show you the mapping of how our technicians came to the results that they came to. They show you your current map of where you sit. And as you said before, maps are changing. All right. So we also have innovated. If you're in an area where FEMA maps are changing, we provide a secondary screenshot to show you what the new preliminary maps, how it will impact your property. So it gives you a window into what's going to happen. And Maps are changing. They changed in Mercer County. They will be changing throughout New Jersey. They're changing throughout the country.
Yes, you are a national company, which is great. So a lot of people in New Jersey have second homes in other parts of the country.
Absolutely.
In Arizona, where there's no floods, I don't know. They have other things. Do they have floods in Arizona? They do, actually,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
Don't fool yourself, because the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean is not there. They do have that, right? There are lakes. There's all kinds of things that could cause that.
Sure.
How about last week, that dam in California?
Sure. There's a perfect example. And I would guess that most of the people that are impacted with that are not in a flood zone. Okay. But that dam burst, which creates flooding. So, if you look at the storms that happened over the last several months, most of the people, as I said before, they didn't have flood insurance. They're not covered. So if it's really cheap, if you are not in a flood zone, you get a preferred rate. Again, we don't sell insurance, but we recommend that everybody get flood insurance, because that's a perfect example. The dam breaks, people flood, you're impacted.
Oh, absolutely. To replace your valuables and your furnishings and your clothing and all that.
Correct.
That's a fortune to do that. I'm sure those people said, oh, damn, I wish I would have listened to that show, The Voice of Real Estate, and heard about Patty and Robert and their company, myfloodstatus.com. It's amazing, and it's simple. You just go on the website. Let's talk about the process. What's the process?
So the process is simple, and I'll share that process with you, but I do want to talk for one more minute about what you talked about the price for $30. But what's really important to note is you're not only getting a 100% accurate report, you're getting access to our Flood Resource Center, to a team of people who will get on the phone with you. And if a bank or insurance company has conflicting information, we'll go to bat with the right information and we'll get that overturned. But secondly, if you really are in a flood zone, our team's going to find out and help you get removed from a flood zone if that's possible. That's all part of that $30. Does it cost more for us to advocate for you? Okay, now if we're getting someone removed from a flood zone, there are other costs associated with that elevation certificate, letter of map amendment. But I just want to enforce that for that $30, you're not just getting a report and no one's going to talk to you.
So there's no a la carte menu after that. In other words, if, for example, your house is high enough, but it's listed in a flood zone, and you're going to be paying through the nose flood insurance when you don't really need it because your home is high, correct?
Yes.
It's still that same $30. There's no extra cost there?
It's $30. However, if an elevation certificate is required, then that is another cost.
How much is that?
That can vary in New Jersey, $450 to $600.
Okay.
But I've heard things in other parts of the country, so it's hard to say, in every state what that would be. The price would vary. And then letter of map amendment. There are two different varieties of doing that: $99 to $350.
Still worth it.
It's absolutely worth it, if someone's going to mitigate that flood insurance.
Well, the flood insurance alone could cost a lot. There are a lot of folks that will stay away from particular properties if they think it's in a flood zone, when in fact it may not be. So if you are a homeowner trying to sell your property, you're going to have to take a lot less for your house because of that. And if you can go in there and prove that it's not, or you don't need flood insurance, it makes all the difference in the world in how much you can get for your house.
Absolutely.
Big difference, because people do like looking at water, but not inside their home on the floor.
Exactly.
They do like to look at that, right?
Absolutely.
And you have a liability errors and omissions insurance. Let's talk about that.
Correct. So we back up each of our reports with $2 million of E&O insurance. So we cover everybody in the transaction. If we disseminate the wrong information, we would make sure that everybody was protected, and we stand up against our results. Nobody else in the industry does that. So that's a big differentiator for us. That's how confident we are in our results. And listen, anybody can make a mistake. So again, we have that comfort level for the agents. So if, as a realtor, you're transferring the risk away from yourself, and you're transferring it over to us at myfloodstatus.com.
Well, I appreciate that very much, because when I refer contractors to do work in my clients' houses, like electricians and plumbers, they're all licensed. It's very important to be licensed. That's important, because there are a lot of people that are there are a lot of people out there, DIY, do it yourself. And this is not something you can do yourself, except go on the website and do it yourself. Let's talk about, once you go in there, what the turnaround time is and how long that takes.
So it's quick turnaround time. I mean, we realize, as a company, that in the real estate transaction, time does matter. In New Jersey, you're looking about a 1 to 5 hour turnaround time because we are local here. It's a very simple ordering process. You go to myfloodstatus.com, plug in the address, the rest of the information that you're prompted, credit card, so forth. You get an email right away confirming, and then you'll get that report. Generally, we like to say 24 hours because, once again, we are national. So it's about a 24-hour turnaround time.
That's really excellent. That's a short period of time. It doesn't take days and days,
No.
which is wonderful. It's really good to have. And it's very user-friendly, your site.
Very user-friendly.
Extremely user-friendly. So that makes it very easy. And there were some other things that you talked about recently that people were not aware of. These tax maps and these flood maps that came out recently, particularly after Hurricane Sandy. So many errors and so many mistakes. What have you found recently? Because I know you do hundreds of thousands all over the United States of these reports. What have you found recently?
What we're seeing is that the wrong property, in many instances, has been identified. For example, I had one last Friday. I was at a presentation, and one of the admin in that office was paying for flood insurance and was told that the flood status had changed on her property. She'd been there for 27 years. She ran the report with us, and we proved that she was not only currently in a flood zone, but she had never been in a flood zone. They identified the wrong property. And that's what I go back to, that GPS data. It's all about accuracy. It's all about lining it up to the property boundaries, to the structure, and making sure that the right property and that the right layering in of that flood zone is done correctly.
And you have the technology to determine that. That's what makes you different.
Correct. We have the technology, and we have a staff of nationally certified floodplain managers. So this team is unbelievable, what they do on a daily basis. They're in the know of everything that's going on in flood. And as Patty had talked about before, once you receive that report, you get access at that point. There's an 855 number that comes in when the report is delivered, where you get access to our team. There's no voicemail during the day. We know that when somebody calls our office up that they have an issue that needs to be discussed, so we put them right on the phone with one of our nationally certified floodplain managers.
Do you find that certain areas are more prone to flooding than others?
Well, obviously the shore area is and any coastal area in the United States is going to be more prone, but flood maps are in every county and every state in the country, so it really depends on what the weather conditions are, obviously, how the floods occur and when they occur, and we just want to make sure that if you are in that area, that you understand that you're in that area, that you can go get the right insurance and that you're paying the right amount of insurance.
And how has climate change affected all of this in your business? Because you've been in this business a long time.
Definitely. I think climate change has a lot to do with what we're seeing today. You know, it's a big political debate why climate change is happening, but it's happening. Something's happening, and we're seeing more storms. You're seeing more flooding. All you have to do is turn on the news, the national news, and you see it. So sea levels are rising, and they will continue to rise, and there's definitely something has to do with that. Absolutely.
When you do this flood insurance, do you see that like on Ocean Boulevard down the coast of Florida, for example, you have all these beautiful buildings that are on Ocean Boulevard, Ocean Ave. Do you think that one day the Atlantic Ocean will rise, right? And these buildings will end up in the ocean like islands? Is that possible?
I think it's very possible.
Yeah.
In our lifetime, I don't know.
In our lifetime, I don't know. But
Right.
if you read at all about this, it's obviously. I mean, it's sea levels are rising, and there's going to come a point where man can't stop the water from coming in. There's so many seawalls, there's so many dunes, and then eventually the water comes in. So I don't know. I don't have my crystal ball in the future, but I would say it's a pretty good bet. It's probably not going to be in our lifetime, I wouldn't think, but I don't know. Do you want to take that bet?
I don't know about that. Take it one day at a time.
One day at a time. Absolutely.
You wonder, like, what natural disaster will happen in the country.
Sure.
We had Katrina, if you recall, when we had that way back, and it affected Biloxi, Mississippi, as well as New Orleans, and to anticipate the unknown, there were actuaries out there that are trying to figure all this out, and having this report is so important. It really is. It's something that you really don't really think about. And up here in the Northeast, it's very cultural. We have basements here, a lot of basements. There are houses built on slabs as well, but basements. And these basements are underground, and they are in properties that have a high water table. So when you talk about a flood, you don't have to be near any kind of body of water, a creek, a stream, a lake, an ocean. You could have a high water table and actually be prone to flooding as well. But there are a lot of properties I show around here with basements. The sump pumps are always going, and the sump pumps are not strong enough to handle the amount of water that may come in a torrential downpour.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And that's, again, why we say everybody should get flood insurance. We're all in a flood zone, and we're all in an X at minimum, which FEMA does not require flood insurance. A bank wouldn't require on an X zone, but we're all in a flood zone. And that's why if you're not, and you're in that high water table area, you'd get a preferred rate and you'd have protection and you'd pay a lot less for your flood insurance.
Let's talk about the zones. X is one of them. What are the different zones?
There's X, there's AE, there's A, there's V. Yeah.
What do they mean?
Well, it's the number of times that a storm would occur in a period of time. The A and the AE in this particular area is really where most people are concerned about, and by the shore as well. And V is high velocity waves. You're having more of the storm surge type of flooding that would occur. So there's a key on our reports. It explains all that too. And again, when somebody receives a report, they're lay people. They're a consumer. They're not going to know how to interpret it. That's where our flood team, our flood resource center would come in, and they would walk you through the report. They'd get on the phone if you're an agent. They'd get on the phone with your client. And as Patty had indicated before, we become your advocate against the bank and the insurance company that have conflicting information. We fight that fight for you. That's part of what we do.
Because your information is more accurate, and they recognize that. Your flood search, they recognize that as being accurate, your research.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so you're important to us realtors, title agencies, banks and mortgage companies, engineers and surveyors, insurance companies. They don't like you so much because you could actually end up they could not have fees that high, right?
Well, conversely, it goes both ways. So you might think someone's in a flood zone and they're going to have to pay flood insurance, but then there are situations where people think that they're not in a flood zone, and they are, and they would have to pay flood insurance. So it's kind of a, it's a funny thing.
It is. And what's a LOMA?
It's a letter of map amendment. So we can actually amend the FEMA map. So Patty talked about it earlier. So if the lowest adjacent grade of your home is above that base flood elevation, let's say it's 8 feet, and you're at 9 feet or 10 feet, you can be removed through a letter of map amendment, a LOMA. And there's a process, as Patty had mentioned. You'd have to hire a licensed surveyor to go out and do an elevation certificate. Once you receive that from the surveyor, you would send it over to our flood resource center. They would review it, and then they would say to you whether or not those elevations could remove you from a high-risk flood zone. And then they would take the next step. They would advise to do a letter of map amendment, and that's a service that we provide as well.
Amazing. Great services.
We're pretty passionate.
I love that. Passion is the name of the game. I love it. This is really an amazing company. You mentioned big box companies. When I think big box, I think of Lowe's and Home Depot. What do you mean by that?
Big box companies are these national companies that not only do flood, but they provide other services to the banking industry, to the insurance industry. It could be judgments, taxes, appraisals. So flood is just a little line item in their offering. Flood is our business. This is all we do. This is what we are focused on, and we are passionate about what we do. And we love it when we save people money or get people removed from a flood zone or show people who were never in a flood zone that they're not in, and they don't have to pay insurance anymore. And it happens every day for us. So that's what drives us. There's a lot of people still out there, Deb, that are paying for flood insurance that shouldn't be, and there's people that should be that aren't because they've been misidentified by their bank and by their insurance company.
And the FEMA maps.
And the FEMA maps. They go, all they have to do when they go to the FEMA site, read the disclaimer. They tell you straight up on that FEMA website that their results are not 100%, that it's not to be used for a flood determination, that they don't necessarily have the correct address in there, and it's not for insurance rating purposes.
Very interesting. So if you're paying flood insurance, you are likely paying too much, and flood insurance can be expensive, just like health insurance is going up every year. Flood insurance premiums are rising between 15 and 18% per year. So the first thing is to run a certified insured flood determination, and myfloodstatus.com does a national flood search. Doesn't matter if you're in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, where we broadcast to. Well, we're podcasted anywhere in the United States. They can help you with that. Just go right online, and an analysis is done on your situation, and you may save some money. This is a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. And another great thing about the website, Deb, of myfloodstatus.com, anybody can go there. There's sample reports, so you can see the type of report that we produce. There's some videos on there that explain the LOMA process, what we just talked about. And there's a Q&A to answer questions that people may have that are commonly asked.
Pretty simple.
Pretty simple.
Easy to understand.
Easy to understand.
Not complicated.
We make it easy.
You make it easy.
Yeah.
Phenomenal company. Thank you so much, Patty
Thank you.
and Robert,
Thanks for
being
having
on
us.
The Voice of
Thank
Real
you,
Estate.
Deb.
It's phenomenal information. And I just want to mention, you just go to myfloodstatus.com. I didn't mention it enough. And also, if you want to call them, they are the Flood Resource Center. You can call them at 855-653-5663. If you're anywhere in the United States, and you can get a report for $30 with all this phenomenal information, whether you're buying a house, selling a house, or just staying in your house. It's a good idea to get this report. Agreed?
Agreed?
Yes.
And then get that report to your insurance agent and see if you can get your premiums reduced, or get the flood insurance if you are in a flood zone and you need it. You'll be happy that you did, especially with climate change today.
Absolutely.
This is Debbie Lang, the voice of real estate of Berkshire Hathaway's Home Services, Fox and Roach Realtors, bringing you the latest, most enlightening information to educate you and inform you on the latest news and trends in real estate. Go out there and make it a beautiful 3-day week holiday. I'll see you next Sunday at 9. I'm Debbie Lang, a top New Jersey realtor with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Fox and Roach Realtors. As a 5-star award-winning professional for over 25 years, I can help you with all your real estate needs. Whether you need to sell your home or want to buy a home, call me to find out why now may be the right time to make a move. My number is 609-213-1900, or you can email me at debthevoiceofrealestate@gmail.com.